Good evening, my friends, and welcome back to my channel. Tonight we share 4 true Texas Highway Patrol horror stories. If you are new here, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you never miss a chilling story. Now let's begin. I've been patrolling Highway 90 outside of Van Horn for 17 years, and I thought I'd seen everything the West Texas desert could throw at me. Drunk drivers, drug runners, accidents so bad they still wake me up at night. But nothing prepared me for what happened on September 14, 2019 during a routine night shift that should have been like any other. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. Dispatch reported an abandoned vehicle at mile marker 147, about 30 miles east of the Van Horn station. The caller had been a trucker who said the car's hazards were on, driver's door wide open, but no one around. Standard procedure. I radioed my location and headed out. The highway was empty that night. No moon, just the endless stretch of asphalt cutting through the dark desert. My headlights were the only source of light for miles. I'd driven this route thousands of times, knew every curve, every landmark. Mile marker 140 passed, then 141. 142, the numbers clicked by in my mind automatically. When I reached where 147 should have been, there was nothing. No abandoned car, no mile marker sign. I slowed down, scanning both sides of the road with my spotlight. The desert looked normal. Scrub brush, rocky soil, the distant silhouette of mountains against the starlit sky. I drove another half mile, thinking maybe I'd miscounted. Mile marker 148 appeared in my headlights. I'd somehow skipped 147 entirely. I pulled over and checked my odometer against my mental map. The distance was right. 147 should have been back there. I called dispatch to confirm the location. The trucker had definitely said mile marker 147 and they'd logged it correctly. I turned around and drove back slowly, watching the markers count down. 148, then 146. Mile marker 147 was just gone. I stopped at 146 and got out of my cruiser. The night was absolutely silent except for the tick of my engine cooling. I walked along the shoulder with my flashlight, looking for any sign of the missing marker post. Maybe someone had knocked it down, stolen it. But there was nothing. Not even the concrete foundation these markers are set into. That's when I noticed something odd about the desert itself. Right where 147 should have been, there was a section of ground, maybe 50 feet wide, that looked different. The dirt was darker, and there were no plants growing in it at all. Just bare, black soil in a perfect strip running perpendicular to the highway, extending into the desert as far as my flashlight could reach. I was about to radio this in when I heard the sound of a car engine. Headlights appeared in the distance, coming from the east. As the vehicle approached, I could see it was an older sedan, maybe from the early 2000s. It was slowing down, hazard lights blinking. The car stopped exactly at the edge of that dark strip of ground. The driver's door opened and I started walking toward it, my hand instinctively moving to my sidearm. But before I could call out, the driver, a woman in a white blouse, stepped out and started walking directly into the desert. Not running, not stumbling. Just walking with purpose, straight across that barren strip of earth. "Ma'am!" I shouted, breaking into a jog. "Ma'am, stop! Texas Highway Patrol!" She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me at all. I ran faster, my boots kicking up dust. She was maybe 30 yards ahead of me, moving at a steady pace across the dark ground. I called out again, my voice echoing across the empty desert. Then she vanished. Not gradually, not behind a rock or bush. 1 second she was there, a clear silhouette against the starlit desert. The next second, gone. I stopped running, my breath coming hard, hand on my weapon. I swept my flashlight across the area where she'd been. Nothing. No footprints in the loose soil beyond where I'd last seen her. The beam of my light just showed empty desert. I walked carefully to the spot, every sense on high alert. When I reached the point where she'd disappeared, I felt it. A sensation like walking through a curtain of cold water, except I stayed completely dry. The temperature dropped at least 20 degrees in the span of a single step, and the sound changed. The ambient noise of the desert night, the faint wind, the distant highway hum, all of it cut off completely. It was silent in a way that felt wrong, oppressive. I stepped back quickly and the normal temperature returned. The night sounds came back. I stood there at the edge of whatever that boundary was, my heart pounding. I radioed dispatch, trying to keep my voice steady, reporting a possible missing person. They confirmed they'd send backup and asked if I needed immediate assistance. I almost said yes. Instead, I went back to the abandoned sedan. The driver's door was still open, interior light on. The keys were in the ignition. A purse sat on the passenger seat. I checked the registration. The car belonged to a woman named Sarah Whitmore from El Paso. In the back seat were grocery bags, the receipt dated that same evening. Everything suggested she'd just been driving home from a normal shopping trip. I photographed everything, documented the scene, and waited for backup. Officer Reynolds arrived 45 minutes later. I showed him the car, explained what I'd seen. He listened with the expression we all develop in this job, professionally neutral. But I could see the skepticism in his eyes. "Let me get this straight," he said. "The woman just walked into the desert and disappeared?" "Not disappeared like ran off. Disappeared like she stopped existing." He looked at me for a long moment, then suggested we search the area together. We spent an hour walking a grid pattern around the sedan, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. We found nothing. No footprints beyond the immediate area of the car, no sign anyone had walked into the desert at all except for my own boot prints leading to and from that cold spot. Reynolds finally called for a tow truck, and we had the sedan impounded. I wrote up my report, sticking to the facts but leaving out the part about the temperature change and the sound cutting off. Some things don't look good in official documents. The next morning I drove back to the location in daylight. Mile marker 147 was there, right where it should have been, the green sign clean and unblemished, mounted on a standard concrete post that showed weathering consistent with being there for years. I got out and examined the ground. The dark strip of soil was gone, just normal desert with creosote bushes and scrub grass growing naturally. I walked to where I remembered the boundary being, where I'd felt that temperature drop. Nothing unusual. Just warm Texas morning, the smell of dust and sage, the sound of the occasional car passing on the highway. Over the next few weeks, I looked into Sarah Whitmore. Her family had reported her missing when she didn't come home that night. Her car had been found abandoned, they were told. No sign of foul play, but also no sign of Sarah. The case remained open but quickly went cold. I attended the press conference when her family made a public plea for information. I stood in the back and said nothing. I started requesting different patrol routes, but the sergeant kept assigning me to Highway 90. "It's my regular territory," he said. "I know it better than anyone." He wasn't wrong, but every time I passed mile marker 147, my hands would tighten on the wheel. It happened again 3 months later. Different location this time. Mile marker 183, about 60 miles east. Same call. Abandoned vehicle, driver's door open, no one around. When I arrived, the mile marker was missing. There was that same strip of dark ground cutting across the desert, and this time I could see something in the distance, maybe a quarter mile out into the wasteland. It looked like lights, dozens of them arranged in a pattern I couldn't quite make out from the highway. They weren't moving, just sitting there in the desert where nothing should be. I got my binoculars from the cruiser and focused on them. They were headlights. Rows and rows of cars parked in perfect lines, their lights on, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. and I could see figures moving between them. People walking with that same purposeful gait, going nowhere. I didn't investigate that one. I called it in as a false alarm, said I'd found no abandoned vehicle at that location. Dispatch confirmed the marker and told me to check again. I radioed back that I was at 183. Nothing there. Possibly a misidentification by the caller. They dropped it. I lied in an official report for the first time in my career. Now I drive Highway 90 every night and I count the mile markers obsessively. Most nights they're all there in perfect order. But sometimes one is missing. Sometimes I see that dark strip of ground and I keep driving, eyes forward, foot steady on the gas. I don't stop anymore, I don't investigate, and I definitely don't walk into the desert. Because I've started to understand something. That woman, Sarah Whitmore, she wasn't confused or lost. She knew exactly where she was going. They all do. And whatever is out there in those moments when the mile markers vanish, it's calling people to it, pulling them across some boundary that shouldn't exist. I've got 12 years until retirement, 12 more years of driving this highway, watching for those gaps in the sequence. Sometimes I wonder if one night I'll feel that pull myself. If I'll stop my cruiser, open the door, and walk across that cold boundary into whatever is waiting. The thought terrifies me. But what terrifies me more is that part of me, growing larger each time I see those missing markers, wants to know what's out there, wants to see where all those people went, wants to understand why the desert occasionally opens up and swallows travelers whole. I keep a tally now, written in code in my personal logbook. 14 times in the past 2 years I've encountered missing mile markers. 14 times that boundary has appeared. 14 times I've driven past without stopping, and each time it gets a little harder to keep driving. My partner and I were running radar on Interstate 10 near Fort Stockton when we got the call about a wrong-way driver. It was 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, and traffic was light, which was the only blessing. Dispatch said multiple motorists had reported a vehicle heading westbound in the eastbound lane somewhere between mile markers 265 and 270. We were at mile marker 250, so we killed the radar setup and headed east on the shoulder, lights and sirens going. My partner drove while I watched for oncoming traffic. These wrong-way calls are the worst. Usually drunk drivers, sometimes elderly people with dementia, occasionally someone having a medical emergency. They're unpredictable and deadly. Our job was to intercept before anyone got killed. The radio crackled with updates. A semi-driver reported the wrong-way vehicle passing him near 268, then a car at 266. The vehicle was moving, maintaining highway speed in the wrong direction. We pushed our cruiser up to 90 miles per hour, weaving between the sparse traffic, warning everyone over the loudspeaker to pull over. We should have encountered the wrong-way driver within minutes. The math was simple. We were traveling east at 90, and they were traveling west at what witnesses estimated was 60 or 70. We'd meet somewhere around mile marker 260. I braced for it, watching the headlights of each approaching vehicle, ready to react. Mile marker 260 came and went. No wrong-way driver. The eastbound lanes were completely normal, just regular traffic, everyone going the right direction. My partner slowed down, confused. I radioed dispatch for an update. Any new sightings on that wrong-way vehicle? Affirmative, dispatch responded. Just got another call. Wrong-way vehicle now at mile marker 255, still westbound in eastbound lanes. I felt my stomach drop. We were at mile marker 262. We'd just passed 255, 7 miles back. The wrong-way driver was behind us somehow, even though they should have been ahead of us, even though they should have passed us going the opposite direction. Dispatch, confirm that location. Mile marker 255? Confirmed. Caller is certain. Says the vehicle nearly hit them head-on. My partner pulled onto the shoulder. We sat there trying to work out the logistics. For the wrong-way driver to be at 255 now, they would have had to turn around, which seemed unlikely. Or they would have had to pass us without us seeing them, which was impossible. We'd been watching every vehicle. Maybe it's a different vehicle, my partner suggested. Maybe there's two of them? It was possible, but the descriptions matched. Older pickup truck, light-colored, headlights on. Same vehicle witnesses had been reporting for the past 15 minutes. We turned around and headed back west toward mile marker 255. The radio continued updating us, mile marker 252, then 248. The wrong-way driver was staying ahead of us, moving in the same direction we were now traveling, still in the wrong lanes. This continued for 20 miles. Every time we got close to the reported location, a new call would come in, placing the vehicle further west, always just beyond our reach. It was like chasing a ghost, something that existed in reports and witness statements but never materialized in front of us. Then the report stopped. The last sighting had been at mile marker 230. We reached that location and found nothing. No wrong-way driver, no accident, no pulled-over vehicle. Just empty highway in both directions. Dispatch confirmed no new calls. The wrong-way driver had simply vanished. We spent the next hour driving the stretch of highway where sightings had occurred, looking for any sign of the vehicle. We checked every exit ramp, every turnaround, every shoulder. Nothing. It was as if the truck had never existed. As we were about to call off the search, a new call came through. Wrong-way driver on Interstate 10. My heart sank before I even heard the location. Mile marker 268, eastbound lanes, vehicle traveling westbound. We were back where we'd started, the exact same location as the first sighting, 45 minutes ago. Same. Description. Light-colored pickup. Headlights on, traveling at highway speed in the wrong direction. "We're responding," I radioed back, but I felt a creeping dread. We'd already responded. We'd already chased this vehicle across 40 miles of highway. And now it was back at the beginning, like nothing had happened. My partner looked at me. "This doesn't make sense." We drove to mile marker 268. As we approached, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a vehicle on the shoulder, a light-colored pickup truck, headlights on, pointing westbound in the eastbound lanes. Just sitting there, stationary. We pulled up behind it, our lights illuminating the truck's interior. It was empty. The engine was running, driver's door closed, Texas plates, current registration sticker. Nothing obviously wrong except that it was pointed the wrong direction. I approached the vehicle carefully, hand on my weapon. The truck was a late 90s Ford, faded white paint, some rust around the wheel wells. I looked in the windows, empty coffee cup in the console, fast food wrapper on the floor. Keys in the ignition, engine idling smoothly, no driver, no sign anyone had gotten out. My partner checked the license plate. The truck was registered to someone in Odessa, about 50 miles north. We called it in and requested a tow truck. Standard abandoned vehicle procedure. While we waited, I walked around the truck, documenting everything. That's when I noticed the odometer through the windshield. It read 347,891 miles. But something was off about the numbers. They weren't quite aligned properly, like the mechanism had broken and reset incorrectly. As I stared at those numbers, they changed. Rolled over to 347,892, then 347,893. The miles were accumulating even though the truck was stationary, sitting on the shoulder with its parking brake engaged. "You seeing this?" I called to my partner. He came over and watched. The odometer continued to tick upward, gaining miles while going nowhere. "Mechanical malfunction," he said, but his voice was uncertain. The radio crackled. Another wrong-way driver report. Mile marker 265. My partner went to respond, but I grabbed his arm. "Same vehicle?" I asked dispatch. "Affirmative. Light-colored pickup, westbound and eastbound lanes." I looked at the truck in front of us, engine running, odometer spinning. Then I looked down the highway toward mile marker 265. Dispatch, we have the vehicle here at 268. We're looking at it right now. It's unoccupied on the shoulder. There was a pause. Confirm you have visual on the wrong way vehicle? Confirmed. Light-colored pickup matches the description. Another pause, longer this time. Stand by. We stood there in the flashing lights of our cruiser, watching the empty truck. The odometer continued its impossible counting. 348 through 12, 348 through 13, 348 through 14. Dispatch came back. We're getting another call. Mile marker 260. Caller says the wrong way vehicle just passed them, nearly caused an accident. Dispatch, that's impossible. We're looking at the truck right now. Are you certain it's the same vehicle? I read off the license plate number. Dispatch confirmed it matched the registration they'd looked up earlier. Officers, we have multiple witnesses reporting active wrong-way vehicle. Please confirm your status. My partner and I looked at each other. We were both seeing the same thing, an empty truck on the shoulder going nowhere. But somehow, simultaneously, that same truck was also miles down the highway, driving in the wrong direction, nearly hitting other vehicles. I made a decision. We're going to check mile marker 260. We left the truck running on the shoulder and drove toward the new sighting location. As we traveled, the radio continued providing updates. The wrong-way driver was moving, always staying just ahead of wherever we were going. Mile marker 258, then 250, then 250. And then we were back where we'd started our shift hours ago, at the original location where we'd first set up our radar. The wrong-way driver reports continued all night. We chased sightings across 100 miles of interstate, always arriving just after the truck had been spotted, never catching up to it. Twice more we found the truck sitting abandoned on the shoulder, engine running, odometer spinning impossibly. And each time we found it, new reports would come in of it driving somewhere else. By the time the sun came up, we were exhausted and no closer to understanding what was happening. The reports finally stopped around 6 a.m. when traffic picked up. We had the truck towed from its last known position at mile marker 245. I followed up on the registered owner. He died 3 years ago in a wrong-way collision on Interstate 10. Same stretch of highway where we'd been chasing his truck all night. The truck had been totaled in that accident and supposedly sent to salvage. Yet here it was, or had been, driving the same route in the same wrong direction 3 years later. I requested the accident report from that fatal collision. The details made my hands shake. The original accident had occurred between mile markers 230 and 270, the exact same stretch where we'd been getting reports. The timeline of the accident matched the pattern of sightings we'd tracked. The driver had been traveling westbound and eastbound lanes witnessed by multiple motorists for approximately 40 miles before finally colliding with a semi-truck at mile marker 230. We'd spent the night chasing a dead man's last drive over and over. The towed truck disappeared from the impound lot 2 days later. No one checked it out, no record of it being moved. It was just gone. And the wrong-way driver reports continue, usually on Tuesday nights around 2:30 a.m. Different officers respond now. They chase the same ghost across the same 40 miles of highway. They find the abandoned truck. They watch the odometer count miles that aren't being driven. Nobody talks about it officially. The reports get filed as unfounded or unable to locate. But we all know. Something is replaying on that stretch of Interstate 10, and we're just witnessing it over and over. A loop of someone's final moments trapped in the act of driving the wrong way toward an accident that already happened years ago. I don't work nights anymore. I requested day shift and got it, because I can't shake the feeling that one of these times we're going to catch up to that truck. We're going to finally intercept it. And when we do, I don't want to see who's driving. The accident call came in just before midnight on Highway 285, about 40 miles south of Pecos. Single vehicle rollover, possible injuries. I was the closest unit, so I took it and headed north from the checkpoint. The highway was empty that time of night, just the endless dark of the Chihuahuan desert stretching out on both sides. I found the vehicle about 10 minutes later, a SUV on its side in the ditch, maybe 30 yards off the road. I radioed my arrival and grabbed my medical kit. As I approached, I could see movement inside. The driver was conscious, which was good. But as I got closer, I realized she was panicking, hitting the windows, trying to break out even though the passenger door was above her and relatively accessible. I helped her climb out. She was in her 30s, badly shaken, but no visible injuries beyond some cuts from broken glass. She kept looking back at the overturned SUV like it might chase her. "Are you hurt?" I asked, doing a quick visual assessment. "We have to leave," she said, gripping my arm. "We have to get away from here right now." "Ma'am, I need to check you for injuries. Can you tell me what happened?" She wasn't listening. She was staring past me into the desert. "Don't you see it? The lights?" I turned to look. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Just the dark expanse of desert under a clear, star-filled sky. Then I noticed them. Lights in the distance, maybe a mile off the highway. They were arranged in a grid pattern, harsh white industrial lighting that seemed completely out of place. "What is that?" I asked. "Some kind of facility?" "I don't know, but it wasn't there before. I was watching the road and then suddenly those lights appeared and I swerved and—" She was hyperventilating now. I got her calmed down and sitting in my cruiser with a blanket while I called for an ambulance and a tow truck. Then I took a longer look at those lights. They were too organized to be random, too bright to be a ranch or pump station. They looked like industrial lighting, the kind you'd see at a factory or processing plant. But there was nothing out there. I'd driven this highway hundreds of times. This stretch was empty desert, protected land as far as I knew. No development, no facilities. I pulled out my map book and checked. According to every official record, there was nothing in that location. No buildings, no infrastructure, nothing. Just open land. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. The paramedics checked the driver and determined she was fine, just shock. She refused transport, signed the waiver, but kept insisting she needed to leave immediately. I arranged for the tow truck to take both her and her SUV back to Pecos. After they left, I was alone on the highway with those lights still burning in the distance. Professional curiosity got the better of me. I'd been a highway patrol officer for 9 years and I'd learned to trust my instincts. Something about those lights felt wrong, but I needed to know what was out there. I drove down the highway until I was roughly parallel with the lights, then pulled onto the shoulder. I took my heavy-duty flashlight, my radio, and my sidearm and started walking into the desert. The ground was rough, covered in rocks and sparse vegetation. I kept my flashlight trained on the ground to avoid turning an ankle. Every 30 seconds or so, I'd look up to check my progress toward the lights. They never seemed to get closer, which I attributed to the flat, featureless landscape playing tricks with distance perception. After about 20 minutes of walking, I stopped and really looked at the facility. I was definitely closer now. I could make out individual structures. There were several large buildings, all metal construction with corrugated walls, arranged around a central open area. The lights were mounted on tall poles, the kind used in industrial yards. I could see vehicles parked in neat rows, though I was still too far away to make out details. The strange thing was the silence. A facility that large, with that many lights on, should have been producing some noise. Generators, machinery, something. But I could hear nothing except my own breathing and the crunch of my boots on desert rocks. I radioed dispatch to let them know I was investigating an unidentified structure off Highway 285. The response was broken, full of static. I could barely make out the dispatcher asking me to repeat. I tried again, giving my exact location as best I could estimate, but the radio just produced more static. I considered turning back. Radio trouble in the field is always a red flag. But I was a rational person. Radio signals get weird in the desert sometimes, interference from atmospheric conditions or who knows what, and I was genuinely curious now. A facility this size couldn't just exist without someone knowing about it. I continued walking. After another 10 minutes, I was close enough to see that the buildings were unmarked. No company logos, no signs, no identification of any kind. The vehicles in the parking area were all dark-colored trucks and vans, also unmarked. The whole place had the feel of a government facility or maybe a private research station. That's when I noticed there were no fences. A facility in the middle of nowhere, clearly security conscious given the unmarked buildings and vehicles, but no perimeter fence, no barriers at all. I could walk right up to it. I should have recognized this as another warning sign. I reached the edge of the facility where the dirt transitioned to paved concrete. The lighting was blindingly bright after walking through the dark desert. I had to shield my eyes for a moment to adjust. When I could see clearly again, I took in the details. The buildings were pristine, like they'd been constructed recently. There was no weathering, no dust accumulation, nothing to suggest they'd been sitting in the desert for any length of time. The vehicles in the parking area were equally clean. I walked closer to one of the trucks and put my hand on the hood. Cold. All the vehicles were cold, like they'd been sitting there for hours. I moved toward the nearest building. It had a standard industrial door, the kind with a push-bar handle. There were no windows. I tried the handle, expecting it to be locked. It opened. Inside was a corridor, fluorescent lighting, white walls. It looked like any industrial or government building. Linoleum floors, numbered doors on both sides, fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. Completely ordinary except for the fact that it was in the middle of the desert and wasn't supposed to exist. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed down the empty corridor. No response. I walked down the hallway, checking doors. They were all locked except for one about halfway down. I pushed it open and found myself in what looked like a control room. There were desks with computer equipment, multiple monitors mounted on the walls, filing cabinets, office chairs. Everything was running. The computers were on, displaying what looked like data streams and surveillance camera feeds. The surveillance feeds showed other parts of the facility. Empty corridors, empty rooms, parking areas with those pristine vehicles. And then one feed caught my attention. It showed the desert outside, with a single figure standing in the harsh pool of light at the edge of the facility. I was looking at myself on the monitor. The camera had captured me from behind, showing me standing right where I'd been 30 seconds ago. I went to the door and looked back down the corridor toward the exit. I could see the doorway where I'd entered still open, showing the dark desert beyond. I looked back at the monitor. The figure, me, was still standing in the same spot, hadn't moved. That wasn't right. I had moved. I was inside now, not outside, but the surveillance feed showed me still standing at the edge of the facility. I left the control room and walked quickly back to the exit. As I passed through the doorway, I half expected to see myself standing there, but the parking area was empty. I was alone. I looked back at the building I'd just exited. In the window beside the door, except there hadn't been a window before, I was sure of it, I could see into the corridor. And I could see myself walking down that corridor just as I had minutes ago. I was watching myself repeat actions I'd already taken. My rational mind tried to explain it. Recorded footage, maybe. A loop playing on screens designed to look like windows. But I knew what I was seeing. This facility wasn't showing me surveillance footage. It was showing me the past, or a version of the past still happening alongside the present. I backed away from the building, not taking my eyes off that window. The figure inside, me, reached the control room door and went inside, just as I had done. I was watching my own recent history replay in real time. I turned and ran. The logical thing would have been to walk, to maintain composure, to radio for backup. But logic had left me. I sprinted across the parking area, past those two clean vehicles, back into the desert. The darkness swallowed me as soon as I left the pool of artificial light. I ran for what felt like miles, stumbling over rocks, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, I turned around to look back at the facility. It was gone, not dark, not shut down. Gone. The desert was completely black, no lights anywhere. I spun in a circle, disoriented. I should have been able to see the glow on the horizon, at least some evidence of those powerful lights. There was nothing. I tried my radio. It crackled to life immediately, clear signal. Dispatch responded to my call like nothing had been wrong. "What's your status?" they asked. I'm in the desert off Highway 285. I need my GPS coordinates." My voice was shaking. They walked me through using my cruiser's GPS unit remotely to ping my location. According to their reading, I was almost 2 miles from the highway, roughly where the facility should have been. I walked back to my cruiser in the dark, using the GPS directions from dispatch. It took almost 40 minutes. When I finally reached the highway, my vehicle was right where I'd left it, lights still on. Everything looked normal. The SUV driver's skid marks were still visible in the dirt. The accident had happened. That part was real. But the facility, I had no proof except my own memory and the fact that I'd walked 2 miles into the desert for no reason I could officially explain. I drove back to the station and wrote up the accident report. Single vehicle rollover, driver uninjured, vehicle towed. I didn't mention the facility. I didn't mention walking into the desert. I didn't mention seeing myself on surveillance cameras in a building that couldn't exist. Over the next few weeks, I researched that area obsessively. Land records, geological surveys, satellite imagery, historical maps. There was no facility anywhere near Highway 285 at that location. There had never been any construction, no permits filed, no infrastructure development. But I started noticing something in the satellite images. If I looked at historical imagery from different dates, there was a pattern. Every few months, for just 1 or 2 days, the satellite photos would show something at that location. Shadows that suggested structures, geometric patterns that didn't match the natural landscape. Then in the next set of images taken days later, it would be gone. The facility appeared and disappeared. It existed in intervals, popping into reality for brief periods before vanishing again. I drove past that location countless times over the following months. Most nights there was nothing but empty desert. But 3 times I saw the lights again, distant, bright, arranged in that familiar grid pattern, and each time there was an accident nearby. Always single vehicle, always the driver claiming they swerved to avoid something or because they saw something that startled them. I stopped investigating. I'd respond to the accidents, help the drivers, file the reports. But I never walked into the desert toward those lights again, because I kept thinking about what I'd seen on that surveillance monitor. A version of myself trapped in a loop, repeating the same actions over and over. What if I'd stayed longer? What if I'd gone deeper into that facility? Would I still be there, walking those corridors endlessly, showing up on monitors while my body moves through the present somewhere else? The facility appears and disappears, and I've accepted that I'll never understand it. Some things exist outside normal reality, phasing in and out of our world on a schedule only they follow. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to be driving past at the wrong moment, you might see them. You might even walk right into them. But I'd advise against going inside, because part of you might not come back out. Part of you might stay there, looping forever in those bright white corridors, while the rest of you drives away and tries to forget what you saw. I still patrol Highway 285. But now when I see lights in the desert where lights shouldn't be, I keep driving. And I tell the dispatch that I didn't see anything unusual, because the truth is too complicated and because I don't want anyone else to end up like the version of me I saw on that monitor, trapped in a moment that keeps replaying while the world moves on without them. I was working a solo night shift on Farm Road 170, the river road that runs along the Rio Grande between Presidio and Lajitas. It's a beautiful stretch during the day, all dramatic canyons and desert vistas. At night, it's one of the loneliest roads in Texas. No cell service, no towns, nothing but 70 miles of curves hugging the canyon walls. Around 1 a.m., I stopped at a pullout to check my radar and do some paperwork. The night was quiet, no traffic. I had my windows down to enjoy the cool air. That's when I first heard the radio station. My patrol radio was silent, so the sound was coming from my regular FM radio, which I'd had turned off. Static, then a voice. Smooth, professional, like a late-night DJ. And for those of you traveling the river road tonight, we hope you're enjoying the stars. Temperature is 62 degrees. No moon tonight, so keep your eyes on the road. Coming up, we have a special request from... The voice faded into static. I looked at my radio. It was definitely off, the display dark, but sound was still coming from the speakers. I turned the knob to actually power it on, thinking maybe there was some electrical malfunction. The display lit up, showing I was tuned to 89.7 FM. Dedicated to all the night travelers out there, this is KRIV, your voice in the dark. I'd never heard of KRIV. I knew most of the radio stations in the region. There weren't many that reached out here. I let it play, curious. The DJ came back on and started taking what sounded like live requests. We've got a call from someone on Farm Road 170. Says they're heading west toward Lajitas. They want to hear something to keep them company. Well, friend, this one's for you. Music started playing. An old country song I recognized but couldn't name. I picked up my phone to try to look up the station, forgetting there was no cell service. The screen showed no signal as expected. The song ended and the DJ returned. That was for our friend heading west. Hope you're staying safe out there. Roads can be tricky at night. Now let's check in with our patrol officer taking a break at the scenic overlook near mile marker 23. My blood went cold. I was at mile marker 23, the scenic overlook. The DJ continued, "Officer, we appreciate your service, keeping these lonely roads safe, but I've got to ask, have you noticed anything unusual tonight?" I sat there in silence, heart pounding. This had to be a coincidence. Someone had seen me, called in a request, mentioned my location, except there was no one else on the road. I hadn't seen a single vehicle in over an hour, and there was no cell service for anyone to call. "No answer from our officer," the DJ said, sounding amused. "That's all right. Sometimes it's better not to talk about the things we see out here in the dark. How about another song to keep the night company?" I turned off the radio, clicked the knob to the off position, confirmed the display went dark. Silence filled my cruiser. Then after about 10 seconds, the voice came back. "Now that's not very friendly. We're just trying to provide some company out here. It gets lonely on the river road, doesn't it? Days without seeing another patrol unit. Nights where it's just you and the canyon and all those dark spaces between the stars." I checked the radio again, still off, but the voice continued, clear as if the radio were on. "Let me tell you something about this road, officer. It's older than you think. Long before it was a farm road, before it was a highway, it was a path. People have been traveling this route for thousands of years, and sometimes late at night, when conditions are right, those old paths overlap with the new ones. past and present all existing in the same space. I started my cruiser, preparing to leave. I didn't believe in ghosts or supernatural radio stations, but I believed in my own discomfort, and every instinct was telling me to get away from this pullout. "Leaving so soon?" the DJ asked. "But we were just getting to the interesting part. See, there's something you should know about mile marker 23. There was an accident here back in 1987. Patrol officer, actually. Went off the road right where you're parked. They never figured out why. No skid marks, no indication he even tried to brake. Just drove straight into the canyon. I pulled onto the road and started driving west, accelerating harder than I should on these curves. The radio, still officially off, kept broadcasting. His name was Officer Martinez, veteran of 15 years, knew this road better than anyone. The night he died, he radioed in from mile marker 23, said he was taking a break. That was his last transmission. 20 minutes later, a truck driver found his cruiser at the bottom of the canyon. I was taking the curves too fast, my headlights sweeping across canyon walls and over the empty air of steep drop-offs. The river was somewhere below in the darkness, invisible. They found something interesting in his cruiser, officer. His radio was off. But according to the log, he'd been transmitting for those 20 minutes. Continuous broadcast. Just static mostly, but if you cleaned it up, filtered it, you could hear something underneath. Voices, conversations, a whole radio program that no one else had heard. I slammed on my brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the road. I was breathing hard, my hands shaking on the wheel. I reached for my patrol radio, the official one connected to dispatch, and keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47, do you copy?" Static. Then, "We copy, Unit 47, everything all right?" The voice was wrong. It wasn't the regular dispatcher. It sounded like the DJ from the Phantom station trying to imitate a professional dispatch voice. "Who is this?" I demanded. "This is dispatch, officer. Who else would it be?" "I want to speak to Sergeant Hernandez right now." "The sergeant isn't available. It's 1:30 in the morning. Is there an emergency?" I didn't respond. I sat there in my cruiser in the middle of the dark road trying to think. If that wasn't really dispatch, then I'd lost contact with the outside world. If it was dispatch, then I was losing my mind. The FM radio, still off, crackled back to life. "Let's talk about what really happened to Officer Martinez. See, he heard the station too. Kriv. Broadcasting from somewhere that isn't quite here, isn't quite anywhere. He listened to it all night, driving his patrol route. And the more he listened, the more he realized the station knew things. Personal things. Things about his life, his family, his secrets. Things no radio station should know. I turned the radio knob, physically ripping it off the dashboard, breaking the connection. The voice didn't stop. "You can't turn us off, officer. We're not coming from the radio, we're coming from the road itself. This canyon, these miles of isolation, they act like an antenna. They pick up broadcasts from times that haven't happened yet and times that already passed. Everything that's ever been said on this road, every transmission, every cry for help, every last word. It's all still here, echoing in the dark." I got out of my cruiser and stood in the middle of the road. The night was absolutely silent except for the voice still emanating from my vehicle. I looked up at the canyon walls rising on both sides, trapping the road in a narrow corridor. I looked at the darkness where the canyon dropped away to the river. How many vehicles had gone over that edge? How many people had died on this stretch of road? And if the radio station was right, if somehow their voices were still here, trapped in this canyon. Officer Martinez made a choice that night, the DJ continued. When he realized he couldn't escape the voices, that they were getting louder, more insistent, more real, he chose to join them. He drove into the canyon at mile marker 23, and now he's part of the broadcast. Sometimes, late at night, you can hear him, warning people, trying to help, but mostly just here, forever. I got back in my cruiser and drove. I didn't care about the curves anymore, didn't care about the drop-offs. I just wanted to get out of this canyon. The radio station continued its broadcast, sometimes playing music, sometimes just talking. Describing the road ahead of me before I reached it. Telling me about upcoming curves, about the history of each mile marker, about accidents and deaths and all the darkness that had accumulated on this route over the years. At one point, the DJ said, "Up ahead about a quarter mile, you're going to see something on the shoulder, a vehicle. It's going to look like it needs help. But officer, I want you to listen carefully. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop." I came around a curve and saw it. A car on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. A figure standing beside it, waving at me. I pressed the accelerator and drove past. In my rearview mirror, I saw the figure watching me go. They didn't move, didn't seem upset that I hadn't stopped. They just stood there, getting smaller in the distance. "A good choice," the DJ said, "when that car has been there for a long time. Different people see it in different decades, but it's always the same car, always the same person waving for help. And anyone who stopped, well, they become part of the road, too." Another voice in the broadcast. I finally reached Lajitas just before 3 a.m. The moment I came into the small town, the radio went dead. Real dead, not fake dead. Just silence. I pulled over at a gas station, the only thing open, and sat under the fluorescent lights trying to stop shaking. I called dispatch on my patrol radio. The regular dispatcher answered, sounding surprised to hear from me. I asked if they'd received any calls from me in the past 2 hours. They checked the log. Nothing. My last check-in had been at 11 p.m. I looked at my dashboard where I'd ripped off the radio knob. It was intact, undamaged. I hadn't broken it at all. I requested a different patrol route the next day. The sergeant asked why. I told him I needed a change of scenery. He approved it without much question. I've been working the interstate ever since, busy roads with lots of traffic and light. I never volunteered for Farm Road 170 again. But sometimes late at night when I'm driving alone, my radio will pick up something strange. A snippet of that DJ's voice, smooth and professional, talking about the river road, mentioning things that are happening there right now, even though I'm 50 miles away. Describing patrol officers taking breaks at mile marker 23, warning them about what they might hear. I change the station immediately. I don't listen. Because I understand now what Officer Martinez figured out in 1987. The road is alive with voices, with echoes of everyone who's ever traveled it. And once you start listening, really listening, it's hard to stop. The voices get louder. They get more personal. They start to feel more real than the living world around you. And eventually, if you listen long enough, you become one of them. Another transmission in the dark. Another voice warning travelers about dangers they can't escape. Forever broadcasting from a road that exists somewhere between the past and present, trying to reach anyone who'll listen. I still have nightmares about that night. In them, I'm back in my cruiser on Farm Road 170, and the radio is talking. But this time, the voice isn't the DJ. It's mine. I'm the one broadcasting, warning some other officer about what's ahead, telling them about the phantom radio station, begging them not to listen. And I know that somewhere on some night when conditions are right and the canyon walls trap all the old transmissions, that nightmare is real. A version of me that didn't make it out, that stopped at mile marker 23 and never left. Still there, still broadcasting, still trying to warn people about KRIV, the station that doesn't exist except when you need the warning most. I don't work nights anymore if I can help it. And I never ever drive the river road, because I'm afraid that if I go back, I'll hear myself on that radio. And if I hear myself broadcasting from a road I'm no longer on, I'll know for certain that part of me never left that canyon. Part of me is still there, trapped in that night, becoming another voice in the dark that warns travelers about dangers they can't possibly understand.